very good evening to you, our esteemed viewer. We are grateful that you have chose Church of Uganda Family TV this particular evening. This is Thursday, and Thursday we discuss leadership and governance. Today we are looking at crisis management. As a leader, of course, when it comes to crisis, that is something else. So you do not have to miss out on today's edition, because the answer is right here. Edrine Osteen Mukalazi is my name, and the team is already here. Should I say it is full house? Dr. Patricia, you're most welcome.
Thank you very much, and good evening, viewers. I'm indeed happy to be part of this conversation this evening.
Diana, we are grateful to have you again.
It's always good to be here. Thank you, and good evening, viewers.
Of recent, someone sent in a message, and they said on our studio WhatsApp, and they said, at least I have something to watch on Thursday evening. And I was like, okay. That is really energizing, that people are really following and they are learning. Because if someone says they have something to watch, then it means it is impacting their lives. We are really grateful for your sacrifice.
We give glory to God.
Yeah. We are looking at crisis management in leadership, and just to get crisis, because when you talk about crisis is a little broader. Now someone would really say, is there a crisis in leadership really? Because when you talk about crisis, we talk about calamities actually out of leadership. But Dr. Patricia, just to start with you, how can you break down the term crisis?
Crisis is an event happening or a situation that becomes a critical occurrence in an institution, or a turning point in an institution or a person's life. It is that event occurrence that happens that becomes like a turning point. It can either be physical, it can be mental, it can be emotional or spiritual, because a spiritual crisis is also. The issue is not the happening itself, as life is made up of many happenings. So each day sometimes you experience some crisis of some sort. And as leaders, the issue is not is how you as a leader deals with the crisis, and not if and when it comes. But as leaders, we should be ready, prepared to deal with such situations. And the real question is how you deal with the happenings of your life as well, because there are certain happenings that appear as crisis. Some people handle crisis by running away from it. Others people handle crisis by avoiding it or acting like it is not there at all, or ignoring it. Others handle crisis by deflecting it, but by becoming compromised. Sometimes you find someone becomes part of the crisis, or some people think they can destroy it. But crisis basically is that event or happening or situation that becomes a critical occurrence, which we as leaders should prepare our minds to face. And the examples, the forms of crisis, there are certain natural crises. It can be violence, it can be rumors, it can be caused by bankruptcy or natural factors. Like we went through COVID-19. Right now, for us who are involved in the fight against corruption, we are looking at it as a crisis as well. There are times we have institutional challenges which just happen suddenly. Like you recall the incident that happened, the bombings.
Yes.
In our Jubilee building. It was a crisis. But as leaders, how do we deal with that?
Are those also categorized under natural happenings?
Yes, it can be natural, it can be situational.
Okay.
It can be an act of violence.
Okay.
For instance, if the terrorists have decided to attack, yes, it creates a crisis of some sort.
Like what they did to our tourists in Queen Elizabeth.
Yes. So that poses a security risk. And as leaders, we need to deal with such situations.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Patricia. Then we are looking at crisis and the forms of crisis. Dr. Patricia has highlighted one which is natural, things that happen. But are there forms of happenings that are expected? They don't happen naturally. You sit back and wait for them to come sooner or later.
That's a strange one. One, because I think When she speaks about natural crisis, it means that it's an act of God sometimes. It's something that you don't foresee. A hurricane, a tornado, nowadays flooding, the different things that happen, a fire gutting out a whole entire section, those are more natural things. But crisis in itself can be different ways. It can be developmental. There are things that come that you sort of plan or expect. For a leader who has a business, if you're starting off a business and you're growing a business, you know that over time I may run out of space. And so I may lose people in the team. These things may happen. So you anticipate that. Is what you call a developmental crisis. Things that you sort of plan. They come with the idea of growth. And as growth happens, there will be crises that you can foresee and that you can plan towards and figure out. If, for example, you know that I'm going to expand my business in 5 years' time, the building that I'm in now may not be sufficient for us, depending on the service that we have to do. And so we start to plan. If I don't see myself in this building in 5 years, I start to plan. Am I going to buy a building? Am I going to rent out bigger space? Am I going to actually build something? And so you're sort of planning how to deal with that as it comes. But crisis in itself is where you have high stakes and you have unforeseen circumstances. So development is not necessarily sometimes classified as a crisis. What you have is a situation that she has described, things that just happen. They are unexpected. Say, for example, the team is in the field and they have an accident. The team is in the field and somebody dies. The boss suddenly falls apart and dies, and the organization has to continue. There are things that you can't predict and are going to happen. Things like COVID-19, it happened to us. It came, it was not expected. None of us had lived over 100 years. Most of us had not lived over 100 years. And it happened, and a leader has got to figure out how to deal with that level of crisis that happens, especially if you are at the forefront. It's an opportunity to see very many things and allow your team to develop. But you also have an existential crisis. That one is more what you would sometimes call personal. Men who go through midlife crisis. I think it's men who go through midlife crisis. I don't think women go through midlife crisis. Do women go through midlife crisis?
You should tell us.
Not so certain.
I think it's a man thing. Yeah, I think it's a man. I think it's men who go through a midlife crisis. But it's all.
But I think women should as well.
No. We have different hormones.
God created us differently.
But I think it's a crisis of purpose. What am I doing in life? Does life really matter? How do the two meet together? Am I living out my purpose? Did I miss out on life? People start off life chasing fast cars, chasing business, chasing money, chasing different things, arrive at 50 years old, 60 years old, and begin to look back and ask, what did I miss? Did I miss out on partying? Did I miss out on fast cars? Did I miss out on those different things? And I don't know if I've had women go through it because I think women have the other end of the stick called menopause. But men have what you call, most likely, what you call midlife crisis. And I don't think it's gender specific. I'm just making it gender because the most I've had is usually men go through it. But it's a crisis of purpose in your life. And usually you are at a point where you begin to act differently than you'd ordinarily act. And so at the workplace, it could look different. As a leader, whether it's you or the team that you're manning, it could look different. If your member decides to start dating young girls in the office all of a sudden, and he never used to do that. If he decides to make a crazy expenditure, such as buying a new fast sports car, what does it look like? If he decides to go on a trip and take long expanses of holiday, what does it look like? So that's sort of a crisis of purpose. What am I here for? What does my life amount to anything? Does it really count? So it's sort of situational development or existential crisis. Those are the things that you normally go through and what you'd call a crisis.
Okay. So we look at a leader, Dr. Patricia, we look at a leader who is in crisis. Are there signs that now there should be a crisis ahead, or according to this particular situation, I should be under attack? That the crisis should be on. Are there signs that someone can look up to?
I think crisis management for leaders, first of all, it helps to draw out your leadership by the way you respond to it in every situation. There are those who look at it positively, like the examples Diana has shared. you look at it positively, you look at a crisis, and as a leader, you accept it, that yes, it has come, you accept it, you face it, and then use it and learn from it and grow from it as a leader. Because when you accept a crisis, you basically you're able to strategize and plan and see how to get solutions, workable solutions. The late President John F. Kennedy observed that the word crisis is made up of two characters. One of them represents danger and the other represents opportunity. And this raises a question to the heart of crisis management. Do you see crisis as a danger or as an opportunity? Because when crisis occurs, sometimes you can sail through it victoriously if you look at it as an opportunity and get to learn and even do the early warning. Prepare yourself and prepare the organization and those around you, just in case it reoccurs. What is it that we are ready to do? There is a character in the Bible I like reading about. He's called Nehemiah. He set out to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. He had his job. He had responsibility in the palace, taking care of the king. And a message came that the walls of Jerusalem were in ruins. So Nehemiah had to seek, first of all, permission from the king, and he had to put time aside, retreat, plan, and move and see how to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. Of course, people saw it as something impossible, like he could not manage, but he had to use certain strategies. He went, examined where the weaknesses are, and then he strategized and began the work with a team around him. What does that teach us as leaders? To always use crisis as an opportunity to sail out of it victoriously and learn and draw lessons from each crisis. So dealing with corruption is a crisis. Unemployment is a crisis. Diseases. Uganda had a problem of ignorance, disease, and poverty. The three: ignorance, disease, and poverty. But because the leadership planned and strategized and saw how to deal with those situations, there are lessons to learn, but then we're able to come out. Today you can't talk about ignorance. People have gone ahead to read. Diseases, at least we have been able to deal with. Poverty, you've heard about the PDM and other programs coming. Of course, they all have challenges, but we see that there are strategies to deal with those situations. So as leaders, I think we play a significant role, especially when it comes to crisis management, because life is not easy for anyone. But the only easy day was yesterday. Why? Because you've been able to go through yesterday, and you've been able to go through the challenges that yesterday had to present, and
No
now
matter
you're
how
faced
you
with,
went through them.
yes, you're now faced with today. So today may be hard, it may go to be hard, so you might as well face it head on as a leader. Only if you're prepared, if you're confident that you can be able to sail through victoriously. Because living through each day boils through making it through the current crises is better than getting through it or by managing it. And that is a mark of real leadership, because a real leader normally has the ability to manage the crisis, not just manage the crisis, but also manage that crisis correctly. And you have to learn how to cope up with it as a leader. How do you cope up with it? Do you just run and avoid it, like I had said earlier on? Do you say, no, I'll push it aside and ignore it as if it didn't happen? So we need to learn how to face it head on. And then in dealing with it, we need also to have the early warning mechanism. And it's the reason why you see in Civil Aviation Authority, they have the fire department. Yes. Not that planes are going to crash and there's going to be fire every time. That's why we have fire extinguishers all over the place, just in case there is a fire. So we need to have an early warning mechanism, because crisis doesn't just happen. Sometimes it is planned, it comes gradually. So we need to also be very, very sober on how we deal with it and manage it. We need, first of all, show deep concern for the people. For instance, if there was an accident or the other incident of the bomb, do I ask about the damages to the property in the building? I should be concerned. I should show deep concern for the people. So as leaders, we need to think about the people, show deep concern for the people. Some leaders are normally concerned about what they have under their control, but it is important for us to know about what is happening to the people, because the human being is the most important and significant resource or factor of production at the moment. So we need to be very mindful about their welfare, their health, their well-being, and how they are doing. Yes.
Thank you so much, Dr. Patricia. Then we are looking at Dr. Patricia has brought in very many interesting things that some leaders actually just choose to keep their heads straight. I'm not seeing what is happening. Even when they are seeing, even when they are listening to, even when they are feeling the fire. But sometimes things happen to us and we never know whether what is happening is really a crisis or it is an imagination. But as a leader, what can they look back to and say,
this could have been a crisis? One, burnout. I think it's easy to identify burnout. And I've seen many good leaders who especially have a team that's under them, understand that people have been running full throttle for a long time. And they are not able, sometimes most of us as human beings don't know when to disengage. There are things that everybody will build up to. Say, for example, I was having a conference some time earlier on this year, actually about August. But you've been preparing it for a period of time, from this build up from January leading down to August. By the time you get to August, there is full throttle. People are running left, right, and center. Meetings are being had at more frequently than they would have had, than they have been having. People are sacrificing more. And when the event actually comes to an end, people collapse and they don't understand why. And then everybody is calling back, no, shouldn't we have a meeting at midnight? Don't we have a meeting at 6? Because those were the scheduled times for the meeting. And as a leader, you need to recognize that people are going through a season where they have been running full throttle and they are having burnout. And when they're having burnout, how do you now work with them to disengage? How do you work with your team? They have run throughout the year for some time, and they have run throughout the year for a while. And as they go throughout the year, things have been happening, right? And they're coming towards December now, when you're going to do evaluation, you're going to do a deep analysis of how you have performed as a team and as individuals. How then do you recognize at some point in the year that people are going through burnout? That for you is a first indicator that you could be heading towards a crisis. Because the more likely reaction for somebody to say is, I'm going to quit. I'm going to quit, I'm going to move on to something else, or this job no longer fulfills me. So those are earlier signs. There's a sign where you pull data. Most businesses have data analysis. So you pull the data from the things that you would have expected. By June, we should have hit this target. By July, this target. By August, this target. And yet you see that your team is there day in, day out. They're keeping time. They're doing all they can do. But the data does not reflect the output. So you begin to see we are heading towards a crisis, because our plan was we would have this by end of year, and it hasn't arrived. So you're now beginning to notice as a leader where is the blockage in the system, where are the things that we can pull back. The other one also is just looking at an open feedback. Businesses that say we have an open door policy. Some of them are very open but very closed doors. An open door policy where the leader says, my door is always open, you can walk in. So you can walk in and say, I'm having a crisis at home, my child is unwell, my parent is unwell, I'm the primary caregiver, I cannot concentrate at work, I can't be in as early as I can, but I can extend the hours and work late. People are able to come to you when they can trust that you have an open door policy. So those are sort of signs a leader can look at and pick on and say that we are probably heading for a crisis, whether it's personal, whether it's business, or whether it's just something that's going to happen to us. And there are many ways a leader can cope through that. And many ways a leader can cope. I think for me, Dr. Patricia touched on it, is having empathy. Having empathy as a leader. It defeats purpose when you say that you stare at it and ignore it. If you ignore it, the business is going to die, people are going to die, nothing is going to get done. Actually, leaders are built in a moment of crisis. People become innovative in a moment of crisis. It's a stepping stone. It's just like any trouble in life. It's a stepping stone to discover what you are made of, what is on the inside of you, but especially as a leader to develop your ability to manage when people need a solution. More than anything, people need a solution in a moment of crisis. That's not to say that you are not human. It's not to say that you can't function as everybody else. But you need to understand and have empathy with the people. Value people above processes, above anything else. Because when the event or the crisis is done, you better have people at the end of it, and people who are willing to go the long haul with you, people who are willing to trust you regardless of what is happening. A good leader will learn to communicate in the midst of crisis. You don't have to have all the answers. You just need to tell them what you know, what you understand. You be open about what you are facing. The Delta CEO, the man who managed the plane during COVID, is the one that gets my attention. During COVID, planes were grounded and many countries took the no entry policy. So goods and services and people, cargo, were not moving around as much as they used to. Now, the Delta CEO got his team together and began to be open about the communication. COVID has hit us. This is what's going to happen. I don't know how much your jobs are going to be affected, but this is what we have on ground. They were hemorrhaging over hundreds of millions in a short while, but he was open about it. Everybody knew at some point in time COVID would turn around. We would open up again. As human beings, we can't be isolated forever. There would come a time where we would be able to manage. But that idea to be open with the people as fast as possible was critical. And so leaders in a moment of crisis, whether you understand fully what is going on or not, be open, be clear about it, be confident about the way you are communicating, allow people to see that you also don't have all the answers. Divest some of that power, allow them to give them an opportunity to also provide solutions. Nobody likes feeling useless during a crisis. I mean, we all want to be able to solve a crisis, but if we feel that we are helpless, it takes away from us as human beings. And so divesting power as a leader is a good way to allow people to come on and be innovative and to give you the kind of business outturn and output that you wouldn't expect. I think last year as a leader is also to ensure that you are talking to the people. I think for me what I have found is to tier the response, what you call a response crisis team. It's important that you tier in response. This is my view. I feel like executives should always be the ones who are navigating with the outside world. They are selling the narrative. They are talking about the narrative that people need to understand. When COVID happened, people did not know how to respond. Different businesses had different responses, but I can guarantee you the ones that succeeded are where executives found out that I could shape the narrative of how a business can be perceived. I could tell clients we're not going to drop on our business. We may be working from home, but we're not going to drop on our business output. You will still have our turnaround time by midnight. In fact, because we are home and we're at home and we don't have to drive as much, we'll give you a better output. The managers at that point are now controlling systems and how things should be running. This is how it should work, processes. But the people who are in mid-management level are closer to the people, and so now you're managing expectations of your people. You are dealing with their sort of crisis, their small crises that are rising because of COVID. So you're tiering, you have a response team in terms of crisis, and you're tiering how you would respond. And also, more than anything, I think that you should know what you value. Let your values guide you when you are in the midst of crisis. If you say we value client retention and client management, how are you going to work with that? I had somebody say, ensure that as a leader, you know your true north and follow your true north. In other words, what's your purpose? Don't sacrifice it. And hopefully, because a good leader always thinks about the people. So know your true north, know what you value, put the values at the center of every decision that you are making. Whether you are saying now we are turning around the way we are delivering healthcare, or we are now preventing the disease, all of them put people at the forefront. I want to save lives. That shows a leader that actually cares about how the business will survive post-crisis.
Thank you so much. Then let's take a short commercial break, and when we return, we are going to continue with this discussion. Very, very important and educative. Stick with us. You're watching Family Hour, empowering families one episode at a time. And when we talk about a family, we have the smallest unit, which is a family where we have the father, mother, and the children. But we also have a family at a workplace where you, as a leader, you're the father of that family. It is important that you get to know some of these things that we are talking about. Today, we are discussing crisis management, and of course, there are some things that have happened and they have seen institutions close down. Like we are talking about COVID-19. We have seen very many businesses close down because of crisis. And like Dr. Patricia earlier said, that some of these things happen naturally, but it is important to you as a leader that you cope up and you manage the crisis without leaving wounds on the hearts of those that you lead. And Dr. Patricia, we are looking at coping up. Of course, Diana had raised some ways on how you can cope up with crisis at the various levels of leadership, because we know leadership is also in levels. What is your submission on this?
Well, like we said, many people have different kinds of crisis they're experiencing. And I would like to pick it from family. The way we deal with it needs a lot of our attention as leaders. How is your home today, for instance, as family? You could be there, a father, a mother, a husband. There are plenty of opportunities to lead as you manage even the happenings in your own families, because there is no way you're going to be successful in managing the office crisis if you can't deal with the family crisis. When COVID hit, families were challenged, and even now today you hear about people talking about the economy. There are challenges left, right, and center. But as leaders, how do we deal with that? The people under your roof should be our first priority and concern. Just like you said, the leaders rightly have that responsibility over the subordinates. So when you take care about the people around you, you are basically practicing strong leadership. How do we cope? How do we respond to crisis as leaders? First of all, as leaders, we need to have a willingness to deal with the crisis within the best of our ability, because it's a mark of true leadership. Then any person can do nothing, and that is easy. But as a leader, we must always step up and do something about it. Do something to deal with the crisis at hand. There are certain basic steps I would like to show which can help us come out victorious and successful in dealing with crisis and the crisis yet even to come, whether it involves building or rebuilding or handling issues at work. First, we must be able to ask questions to know the facts involved. What kind of crisis is this? What caused it? We should be interested in the hearts and the welfare of people, like Diana has articulated. Then secondly, we need to listen in. Communication is very easy. Fact gathering efforts. We should be able to get the reports rather than giving marching orders. Go and do this without analyzing the issues or the facts at hand. Thirdly, we need to seek help. We need to always consult with others, because there are people who are knowledgeable about certain things, more knowledgeable than even we, the leaders. So we need to seek help, because there is no crisis that is unique. Some incidents could have happened before and have solutions, but each crisis comes with new twists or turns. We need to seek guidance or counsel or consult the experts on how to better manage. A good leader will always seek the wisdom of others, because there is no man who is an island. We need to rely on the wisdom of others. That's why we have consultative meetings. That's why we have planning meetings and engagements. Therefore, a smart leader surrounds himself with a crop of wise counselors who can give guidance and advice. He knows a leader is only as wise, as capable as his advisors. So if you're a leader, you should be able to have a group of advisors who should be able to guide. A Christian leader normally has 3 sources of concern for counsel. 1, we basically seek wisdom from God, and this is through reading the Word of God and praying. We seek wisdom from good counselors and advisors, and we also seek wisdom from the Holy Spirit through prayer. Then we need to also determine a strategy. After knowing the facts, after consulting, we need to come up with a strategy on how to deal with the crisis at hand, and then we need to implement and monitor progress. There are very significant lessons we can learn, especially in crisis management. 1, as leaders, we must not ignore crisis. We must not be seen to ignore crisis, because crisis requires our attention. Like Diana said, that is the strength of leadership. The way you overcome it shows strength and power. Don't just deflect a crisis. A leader should be able to deal with a crisis. We should not shift blame for a crisis. Some people, when an incident has happened, they're quick to say this person caused it or look for causation. Like we from the legal profession, we normally look for causation. But the issue is not who caused it. The issue is what can be done to turn the crisis around, not who caused it. Once that is handled, then later on we can deal with causation and determine how it can be corrected or prevented in future. But we need to first know how to turn it around. Then we should not overreact to situations of crisis. We should not make hasty decisions in response to crisis, because most issues don't just graduate into a crisis. We have to take time and also respond wisely. We should seek advice from others, like this I already said, because there is much wisdom when it comes to issues of counsel, when it comes to issues of advice or consulting with people while we do our work. So a good leader will seek the wisdom of others at all times, and that is how that leader can manage crisis. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Patricia. Then we are looking at crisis management. Yes, the crisis is there, and as a leader, at whichever level you are at, how can they effectively manage the crisis?
Trust yourself.
Okay.
I think the first thing a leader should know is to trust themselves. You have got experience over time, hopefully. You have a better understanding of the business. You know what is at stake compared to anybody else. I like to say leaders have a different eye view from everybody else. Their eye view is not is not similar to somebody who does not hold all the power. I think the saying is heavy is the crown, heavy is the head that holds the crown. Because you have so much responsibility. You see what is at stake more than anybody else. And so as much as possible, trust yourself. Without further ado, I've always admired people who are willing to seek help. Mm-hmm. Now, I remember when I worked in a place and we worked in a multiracial environment. And we thought certain things were purely white race thing, such as seeing a counselor. And our work involved constantly being in the field, dealing with land grabbing, land retention, fighting for widows and orphans, and people who had been displaced of land. At one time, I thought it was just ordinary work. I went to law school, I go think about a mediation, figure out how to mediate. I don't understand why we need news people during the mediation. So one time I was mediating a family, and out of nowhere people got very dissatisfied. A riot began. The driver said, "Let us leave." I said, "No, they will come down." Now I was very unaware about the danger that we were in at the time. The driver kept saying, "Get into the car and let's leave." The person who was with me, that was not a lawyer, was also advising. But because I thought, no, we should push ahead until we find a solution, I was unaware of the amount of chaos that we were in before we later on saw ourselves on news that evening. But over time, they told us to seek counselors. And we did not realize, or I did not realize then, that if you do this work long enough, there is a breakdown in a certain part of you, emotionally, physically, and it takes a toll. And that's when you enter into a crisis of purpose and life, and you don't understand where it's coming from. But the kind of work that you do can take a toll on your emotions, especially lawyers who have to listen to people's problems. If they are not transactional, commercial, they're listening to people's problems constantly, and you're seeing the weight of the world, the weight of impunity, the weight of sin, the weight of all of it going against people. And every time you get involved in it, sometimes you disengage and then lack empathy for the people. Sometimes when you're absolutely bogged down by it continuously, you will be dissatisfied and you're going to enter into a mode of crisis. It's important that that you are finding ways to have outlets for all this pent-up pressure. And so our leaders then saw something I was not able to see at the time. They made mandatory counseling sessions for us every year. And so that in a way was saying, seek help. And I advise leaders as much as possible, seek help. Seek help from counselors. Is nothing wrong in the midst of crisis from seeking help from a counselor. There's nothing wrong with seeking help from experts who have dealt with crisis before, whether it's similar or not. Just have experts that will walk you through the process. As much as possible, you should also be thinking of a business continuity plan. Say, for example, you are the boss and you are the sole proprietor of the business. If you fall down dead today, there has to be a business continuity plan in place. I've seen by nature many law firms close because there was one single partner who formed the firm and then he passed on. And he was the well-known partner. Now, by law, we can't retain your name. The name has to change. But guess what? The business can also close because there was no business continuity plan. You went out of the country, found treatment, and then passed away out of the country. People who have been working and slaving away at your vision are unable to continue because now the family is coming in and they have something to say. Your friends are coming in and they have something to say. Everyone is coming in. But if you had a plan that said, this is how the business is meant to run, regardless of my presence or not, you are able to have the business continue. Build a business that's beyond yourself. A leader should always build a business that's beyond them. And having a business continuity plan, a business continuity plan is one of the ways you can ensure that the business continues, regardless of whether you drop down dead or not. The other, which I find very beneficial and many people neglect, is have policies and plans in place. Plans for in case there's an accident of a member at work, in case somebody has dropped dead, how do we respond as a workplace? During COVID, people lost people who were not on insurance in particular places. It affected some people so badly that workplaces sort of came in, some out of compassion, to save certain people. But you see, when the person left the workplace after that, the people who were employing were offended. They said, but we helped you. But there was no policy or plan that dictated what I'm getting back from that. So having a clear policy and plan is important for people because you plan. The crisis has pre-crisis, which is the planning, which is the strategizing. It has the crisis period where you have to do things like deal away with hierarchy. You have to deal with communication. There are so many things that are involved in crisis. The leader has got to juggle and manage. It has to deal with divesting power. Then you have the post-crisis where you're learning from the different things. As much as possible, you need to have a plan. Then the other one, which she hinted on, Dr. Patricia, is assess the risk and plan ahead as much as possible. You can't know what you're going to suffer if you've not been able to assess the risk. Assess the risk. What's the cost of us making this decision? That should not tie you down and say don't respond as fast as possible. You should be responsive because inaction will make people run around like headless chickens. And when they run around like headless chickens, you have lost your ability to lead in a time of crisis. So assess the risk, plan ahead as much as possible, communicate the process and how you are handling the process. Make sure there's an incident report about what is happening and how the crisis is being dealt with. You saw how constantly during COVID the president was updating us every week on TV. Rather than getting it from the LDUs first, you had to hear it from the president on TV. So it's as much as possible, you have to open those communications. And I think lastly for me is to have a business recovery plan. because no one remains the same after crisis. No person remains the same, no leader remains the same, no business remains the same. You've encountered something that has completely altered the way you do business, altered the way you perceive people. There are people who have left you along the wayside when you needed them the most. And so that takes a toll on you, and you need to acknowledge that. And so you should have a plan. What were the lessons that we grappled with, or what were the lessons that we learned from this particular time, and how can we implement going forward? And then what do we need to put in place? I'm hopeful that Uganda now has a management plan for health as we go towards something, that we have many ICUs that are operating. We have many planned oxygen tanks that are available. All those things all those things need to be in plan, because we're coming off a crisis that we would have learned from, and a good leader by now has a plan in place.
Thank you so much, Diana. Now, as we draw closer to the end of this discussion, there is something that she talked about which is very important. She said there is the pre-crisis and then the post. But most importantly, how should someone prepare for a crisis? What should they put in place that in case this happens? For example, you talked about corruption, that as a crisis, an example. But we already have the IGG, which is a directorate in place to should it come when you've registered a number of cases of corruption, or it should be on standby, that the Inspectorate of Government is there. Whether there is corruption or not, it is there on standby.
Thank you. I think it calls for early warning mechanisms, not to wait to deal with post-mortem. When we do early warning, we know that there is a crisis of corruption. And we know that if we empower the young people, they will be the ambassadors of integrity. They will be able to deal with the challenges to do with corruption and reduce the instances of corruption. Nevertheless, much as we are doing the early warning, through the preventive approach, we are also doing the prosecution, the investigations, and of the cases as and when they come. But in the early warning, it is very important, because we find ourselves partnering with institutions of learning to train the young people and tell them about their responsibilities in dealing with corruption. We have said it is a citizens' war as a preventive approach, because we want the citizens to own up and take responsibility in reporting cases, because they help us detect quickly and also quickly fix problems as they occur. But as you see, crisis management draws out your leadership, because you then help to prepare and re-strategize. Like, we look at corruption as a crisis, and we are saying 5 years from now, where do we want to see this country? If we empower the youth who are the future leaders, then they will be able to handle the situation. Like I said earlier on when I was giving the example of Nehemiah, I know prayer also empowers your leadership, because if we pray, and not only pray but act and take action on these instances and face crisis squarely and re-strategize and come up with mitigating factors. Like, we have seen corruption. We know what are the causes of corruption, what are the drivers of corruption, and we are now in how to deal with it. We are sailing in the deeper waters, coming up with strategies and solutions, because even the corrupt don't sleep, by the way. That's why it's like an amoeba. Someone will give a bribe here, it changes forms and shapes. So we have to come up with new strategies. That's why you heard about strategies like the lifestyle audit. Now we have the integrity campaign. We are disseminating the values. We want people to know what their responsibilities are. M-Pesa, honesty. Can you promote honesty among the young people? Accountability, integrity, and so on. And those are the things we are pushing, so that we have a changed future for this country, especially in respect to fighting corruption. Then we also know that problem solving helps to refine our leadership. If we're a leader who can identify a problem and have solutions, have it solved, then your leadership is refined. Conflict management also gives resolve to our leadership. Just like purity blesses the leadership, and loyalty affirms our leadership. So as leaders out there, we need to come with clean hands ready to serve and not just waiting to serve. And in serving, we should be able to confront cases of crisis. We should be able to manage crisis very, very well. We should be able to seek support, like Diana said, consult, seek wisdom and guidance from others, because you can't manage it all by yourself. You need to seek support in order to manage the crisis. Yes.
Thank you so much, Dr. Patricia. Then it's you who talked about the pre-crisis. What should be done in the pre-crisis?
Strategize as much as possible, because while crisis itself is unforeseen, you need to have a plan. If you know that you're probably more likely to face certain things, you're likely to face a tornado, you're likely to face flooding, you're likely to face an economic shutdown, you're likely to face all these things. Strategize as much as possible. Have a response team in this case. As much as possible, practice and plan in case this happens. You know why they have fire hazards and assembly points? And they usually always do a drill for people, and they ring the bell. Hopefully, we have bells in this country, and then you run to the fire hazard.
Fire brigade
the fire brigade suffers through the traffic in this country. Usually, I'm not sure whether to move or to stay on the road. I was like, but now where do I move? But plan and practice as much as possible. It's also a time to build networks, because you're going to evoke these networks during the crisis time. So build networks, ensure that you have as many networks as possible. You're getting the different people with the different facets. And because it's important, you'll need a counselor at some point. So build the network. It's important, you need a crisis manager at a certain point. You'll need an institutional person, a financial institutional person, to give a talk on how to handle. So build those networks before even time before the crisis arrives, and also be self-aware as a leader. A leader needs to be growing half the time. So you have to be self-aware and ensuring that you know yourself, you know your team, and you know how you are managing pre-crisis situations.
Thank you so much. And what are your parting shots?
Well, mine are, one, nobody should avoid a crisis, because a true leader in a crisis will become an effective leader. We see it as much as possible. Those who have risen to the top of their game are people who were able to manage a crisis and to do well with the crisis. You can't do it on your own, so as much as possible, onboard people. And I like to say, let your true north guide you. Let your value system guide you. Don't sacrifice your value system at the expense of processes. Let them be the center at which you make decisions.
Thank you so much. Then, Dr. Patricia, what are your parting shots?
I encourage leaders out there to always have God and to pray, but not just pray, but also take action, not to run away from crisis like Diana has said, but to face it squarely, because crisis comes to redefine their leadership. So when they are victorious, then their leadership is strengthened, and people will have faith and hope and trust in their leadership abilities. Then in coming up with solutions and dealing with crisis, you should always have human beings at the heart, at the core of it, because a human being is the most important and significant factor of production today. For every decision you take, be mindful of its implications on the human beings who are doing the work in the different organizations. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Patricia. Thank you so much, Dana. And thank you so much, you, our viewer. It's been a pleasure having you. This is Family Hour. Tomorrow is Friday with Don't Miss Parenting with Claire Gwenje. I've worked with Brin Koategeka, Linda Dina, Jonah Jal, Didymus in transmission, and very many other people out there working together to see that you have this image. God bless you. Meet again next week.